I'm about to show you 10 movies from the 80s so good they should have been massive hits. But every single one bombed so hard they ruined reputations, killed studios, and even got banned. Let's see how that happened. The Right Stuff is a 3-hour epic about the first years of America's space race. It starts with Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier in 1947, and then it goes through the whole Mercury project, the first American astronauts trying to beat the Soviets into orbit. Philip Kaufman adapted it from Tom Wolfe's book. The movie is almost lyrical in places, takes its time, and the tone is more subdued than you might expect from a space drama. Kaufman even joked it was the longest movie ever made without a plot. But what he really does is put Yeager's stoic lone wolf vibe side by side with the bravado of the Mercury 7. He's kind of questioning if any of them really had the right stuff. But at the same time, the movie is totally compassionate, even celebratory by the end. The cast is great with Scott Glenn and Ed Harris, and there's some pretty trippy visual effects for the time. This movie cost $27 million and actually flopped. Box office was just $21 million. It got 8 Oscar nominations, won 4, but never found its audience. The Ladd Company, the studio behind it, was hoping for a hit to make up for a string of flops. Didn't happen. They had to go into hibernation for more than a decade after that, even though critics loved the movie. Christopher Nolan actually screened it for his Interstellar crew, called it almost perfectly made. There was a miniseries remake from Disney in 2020, but it's nothing compared to the original. Day of the Dead is Romero's third zombie film, and you can tell he was aiming for something big. He called it the Gone with the Wind of zombie movies, but the budget just wasn't there, so what you get is way more claustrophobic and honestly probably more intense. It's all set in this underground bunker with a small group of survivors. There's scientists, military, everyone at each other's throats. The science side's trying to find a cure, and the soldiers just want to keep control. There's even a point where they realize going back to the way things were isn't going to happen, so they escape and set up their own commune on an island. It's super tense, with barely any of the dark humor from Dawn of the Dead. The gore is next level for the time. Tons of practical effects, pure 80s horror. Some of the acting goes way over the top, especially the supporting cast, but what stands out now is just how timely the whole thing feels. It cost $3.5 million, made just $5 million, and at the time, a lot of people found it too grim. Top Secret cost about $9 million to make, pulled in $20.5 million at the box office. This is from Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker, the same trio behind Airplane. Instead of disaster movies, this time they go all in on Cold War nostalgia and classic spy movie riffs. Val Kilmer is the lead, playing a rock star touring East Germany. And out of nowhere, he gets wrapped up in this spy plot with a romantic angle. The movie is all over the place, and that's honestly part of the fun. One minute it's making fun of World War II movies, the next it's suddenly a musical, and then you get a random Blue Lagoon parody. The comedy isn't as tight as Airplane or Naked Gun, and sometimes the story just drops out completely, but the whole thing has this weird, affectionate vibe. They never go for mean-spirited jokes. It's more like they're just celebrating all the stuff they grew up watching. The film got hit hard in test screenings, which meant they cut it down until, basically, there was no real ending left. Even the people who made it had trouble describing what it was supposed to be. At the box office, it was considered a disappointment, but if you like movie spoofs, there's a lot to enjoy here. The Stunt Man is from 1980, budget was about $3.5 million, made just over $7 million. This is one of those movies about making movies, but it actually does something different with it. Steve Railsback plays a Vietnam vet who's on the run from the police. He stumbles onto the set of a World War I film, and the director offers him a deal. Take over for a stuntman who just died in an accident, and he'll hide him from the cops. The whole thing is part comedy, part thriller, and there's a lot of surreal, magical realism going on. Peter O'Toole here just owns every scene. He's playing a director who's completely in control of everything, or at least wants you to think so. The movie pokes fun at itself with music, jump cuts, even having actors break character. It's not cynical at all, just the opposite. It really tries to show movie making as something that can actually help people. Back in 1980, audiences weren't ready for this kind of comedy. The marketing couldn't figure out how to sell it, and even the studio didn't know what to do with it. The co-writer, Richard Rush, said the execs just didn't get it. They kept asking, is it a comedy, drama, or action movie? And the answer was yes to all of it, but that wasn't enough for the suits. It's a shame because The Stunt Man is still one of the best movies about movies that nobody saw. Cutter's Way is one of those movies that deserved way more attention than it ever got. Made for $3 million, it barely made half that at the box office. It was originally called Cutter and Bone, based on the novel by Newton Thornburg. The studio just left it to rot, so it slipped straight into obscurity. John Hurd is Cutter, a Vietnam vet, disabled, drinks too much, angry at the world. His best friend is Bone, played by Jeff Bridges. Bone gets wrapped up in an unsolved murder and Cutter latches on, convinced a local oligarch is behind it. They keep digging, but the more Cutter is sure he's found the bad guy, the more the audience is left in the dark. By the end, the villain is finally confronted, but the movie keeps things ambiguous, never spelling out exactly what he did. It's shot by Jordan Cronenweth, so at least it looks incredible. The whole thing feels like a goodbye to the paranoid thrillers of the 70s, very much in the vein of Chinatown or The Long Goodbye. But by the early 80s, that kind of movie was already out of fashion, so it never had a chance commercially. Ishtar is probably the most infamous flop of the 80s. Budget was $51 million, made just over 14 back. Elaine May directed it. She only made 4 movies, and this was her last one for a major studio. It was meant to be a kind of tribute to those old Bob Hope and Bing Crosby road comedies. Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman play 2 guys chasing the dream of being pop stars even though they have 0 talent. On their way to a gig in Morocco, they get mixed up in a CIA mess. At the time, Hollywood was shifting from the director-driven 70s into the corporate 80s, and Ishtar landed right in the middle of that. Critics hated it immediately. They actually called it one of the worst movies of the year, then one of the worst movies ever. The reviews don't make much sense if you watch it now, honestly. Isabella Johnny is barely used, but that's the only thing I'd really knock it for. If this exact movie had been directed by a guy or starred some comedy actors instead of Beatty and Hoffman, maybe it would have been forgiven. But the movie flopped so hard, Elaine May never directed another big studio movie again. This is one of those movies most people never get around to, but if you care about movies as art, it's a must-see. Paul Schrader made this on a $5 million budget, and it's a biopic about Yukio Mishima, who was a Japanese author and activist. Definitely one of the most controversial figures in Japan. The whole thing is stylized like nothing else from the decade. Schrader mixes documentary, drama, and full-on high-art visuals. The look of those sequences is unreal, totally different from anything else at the time. You see Mishima planning his failed coup against the government, and the movie runs right up to his death by seppuku in 1970. Schrader never tries to give you easy answers about Mishima or why he did what he did. It's all left open, which is what makes it work. Mishima's politics made him a non-subject in Japan, so when the movie came out, it was banned there. No surprise, it flopped in the US too. There's no actual stars, it's in Japanese with subtitles, so it was never going to be a Hollywood hit. The box office was just over $500,000. Honestly, the fact this movie even exists is kind of a miracle. Coppola had the wildest run of hits in the 70s, but the 80s started off rough for him. One from the Heart is his big swing at reviving the movie musical, and it bombed at the box office. The budget was $26 million. The box office didn't even hit $650,000. It's about a regular couple living in a version of Las Vegas that looks nothing like real life. Coppola had the whole thing built in a studio, so it's this surreal, make-believe world, all neon and dreamlike sets. They break up, go through some stuff, but in the end up right back where they started. That's pretty much the story. Coppola was aiming for something big here, like Powell and Pressburger or Renoir pushed the style as far as possible. Audiences in the Reagan era didn't care though. They wanted something else, and the movie flopped, leaving Coppola with years of money problems. Return to Oz is Disney's official sequel to The Wizard of Oz, and you can tell right away this is not what anyone expected. It cost $28 million to make and only brought in 11. The whole movie is way darker than the original. Dorothy comes back to Oz, but now it's a wasteland. The place is basically wrecked, gnomes are running things, and there's this weird sense of melancholy through the whole thing. Walter Murch directed, his first and only time doing it, after winning an Oscar for editing Apocalypse Now. He wasn't exactly experienced with effects, but what you get here is a weird, creative mix of claymation and animatronics. The movie's tone is what killed it for a lot of people. Murch decided to work mental illness into the story. Even pushed back against the originals, it was all a dream ending. Some critics thought the movie was saying Dorothy was actually delirious, so the ending lands closer to something like Brazil or even Pan's Labyrinth. It flopped hard. Disney even skipped a cinema release in the UK entirely. Critics hated it at the time, and it never even got close to the love the 1939 original still gets. Star 80 is about as far as you can get from Bob Fosse's usual musicals. He directed it 3 years after the real-life case it's based on, and it's just brutal. The story's about Dorothy Stratton. She was a Playboy star and aspiring actress, and her husband, Paul Snider, ends up murdering her. Visually, it starts out loud, full of flash and neon, but as it goes on, it strips all of that away until you're left with this simple and ugly ending. Fosse's directing style here doesn't let you off the hook. He never tries to romanticize what happened, and he doesn't give the audience a break either. There's no cheap sympathy except for Stratton herself. People back then couldn't handle it. The film bombed, and neither lead's career really took off, even though these are probably the best performances you'll see from either of them. It was Fosse's last movie. He died 4 years later. Star 80 is one of those films you watch once and never forget, but most people missed it completely.